Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got quite a show for you today. So much interesting news to get to. So let's do that. Let's get right into it. What a difference a week makes. It was just last Monday that all eyes were focused on GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump and the failed attempt on his life. But that almost feels like ancient history now. In another virtually unprecedented development, President Joe Biden has announced to the world via social media that he is abandoning his plans to run for president. His letter announcing that reads in part, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Now, the last time something remotely similar to this occurred was during the 1968 election when President Lyndon Johnson said he would not seek the party's nomination. But he was not a mere 170 days away from the election, as Joe Biden was when that happened. Now, while the political world is mostly expecting Biden to drop out, this announcement stirred even the most complacent out of a stupor and shocked the political world. Now, political and media figures who had schemed to replace Biden are now heaping praise on him for, in their words, doing the right thing and getting out of the way. Former President Barack Obama wrote that Joe understands better than anyone the stakes in this election, how everything he has fought for throughout his life, everything the Democratic Party stands for, will be at risk if we allow Donald Trump back in the White House. It's a testament to Biden's love of country. Now, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was in fact the mastermind behind this effort to get Biden to drop out, said his legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history.
Now, behind the scenes, Democratic senators, congressmen, and other power brokers worked tirelessly over the past week to persuade Biden to exit the race. They are now falling in line to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris for the nomination. She already has the support of Biden, the Clintons, and other Democratic royalty. But there are currently more than 153 Democrats backing Kamala, and the number is sure to grow. Others, including former President Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, have not yet thrown their political weight firmly behind Kamala. Marianne Williamson seems to be the only Democrat who's mounting any sort of challenge to Kamala Harris. Rumors had circulated yesterday afternoon that Senator Joe Manchin was considering a run, but he put an end to that speculation this morning, saying, "I'm not running." Meanwhile, money is pouring into the Democratic campaign coffers. Sunday was the single biggest day for online Democratic donations in years. More than 50 million came in, according to the New York Times. Donations soared from 200,000 an hour before the president stepped aside to 11.5 million in a single hour. Excitement is in the air.
So here we are. Joe Biden has gotten out of the race, and it is now going to be Kamala Harris, I would expect. That's who Joe Biden has chosen. You know, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about an open convention, and what about Gavin Newsom? What about Gretchen Whitmer? What about some other people? No one is speaking up and saying, I'm going to make a go of this. They're all falling in line behind Kamala Harris. So it's overwhelmingly likely that that is going to be the Democratic presidential candidate. So here we are. I obviously did not think this was, even up until seconds before Joe Biden said he was getting out, I still didn't really believe it was going to happen because his desire to hold power and seek a second term were so strong, and it seemed that nothing was going to shake him. But he was, I think, ultimately forced out by a combination of elite pressure from senior Democratic figures like Nancy Pelosi, and it sounds like behind the scenes Barack Obama. And then also the media has been relentlessly critical of him for the last month, ever since the debate performance. We saw what effect the media can have on a Democrat when they're treating them as harshly as they've treated Donald Trump for the last 8 years. And then also the fact that the donor money was entirely going to dry up. There was even more devastating poll numbers coming out for Joe Biden, that the race was really slipping beyond his grasp. His potential to defeat Trump was evaporating. So he is gone, and we will have, he's not leaving the presidency. He's going to finish out his term, which Republicans are saying is, well, wait a minute, if he's cognitively unfit to run for re-election, how can he be the president right now? And I saw like Nancy Mace wants to introduce a motion calling on the cabinet to invoke the constitutional provision to remove him and all that kind of thing. So that there will be plenty of discussion of that on the right. But what do you make of all this?
Well, it doesn't feel good to be right. I wish he had dropped out much sooner than this point in the race, to be honest with you, but it's fascinating to see it play out the way I thought it would. Nancy Pelosi saying things like we could do it the easy way or the hard way. Crazy coming from Nancy Pelosi, but behind closed doors, it sounds like a lot of the reporting that Democratic loyalists to Biden were like, this is ridiculous vibes-based reporting. None of this is true. None of this is really happening. Turns out it all was. So DMs are open for apologies. But I think it's shocking to see. I went so far as, I don't know if you remember this commentary, but I was like, I think it's going to happen in this way. They're going to threaten to embarrass him. They're going to run ads that make him look really bad. And that's exactly what happened. On Friday, there was reporting that a new super PAC was created of Democratic donors on July 9th called Pass the Torch PAC. They had a $36,000 ad slotted on his favorite show, Morning Joe, calling on him to drop out. So they've now pulled it. They might use the money to make an ad for Kamala Harris instead. But very shocking that it played out exactly how I thought it would.
Yeah. Now they're flattering him. They're heaping all this praise. I can't tell you how many people I've seen, Democratic aligned people, Democrats, media figures saying, what a patriot, what an America first move, he did the right thing for the country. And to believe that, you have to be a figure of the Democratic or liberal thinking that it is a good thing for Democrats to defeat Donald Trump, which obviously is a view that many people have, also many people don't have. But so if you're convinced that it's important for another Democrat to win, then I guess this was a patriotic move because it's so fundamental. But I don't know. I find the whole rhetoric a little off-putting. Okay, you are on one team. You want your team to win. You convince Joe Biden to do a likelihood of our team winning, maximizing move. Good for you. Now it's at the same time, and we're going to talk about this a little later, so we won't spend too much time on it right now. But at the same time, democracy itself is at stake. But this feels very counter-democratic. Now I know Joe Biden didn't have this, reservoir of deep fanatical support or loyalty the way Donald Trump does on the other side. But he did actually win the delegates. It was kind of a sham process because it wasn't a competitive process. Mm-hmm. But he was actually chosen by the voters to be the candidate. And now a combination of elite pressure, big money donors, and those people have said, no, actually the will of the people will be thwarted. He's not going to be the candidate. Now, I know it's not exactly like that because
it's not at all
people
like
had
that.
no. Well, it's a little bit like that. He won the contest. He won under the provision for picking the candidate. He won. Was it a competitive process? No. Was the process good? No. But he did win the process. It's kind of like when people complain that, but we won the popular vote. That should be who's president. Well, no, sorry. Maybe it should be, but it's not the system.
Well, a federal judge ruled after the 2016 election that within the Democratic National Convention, delegates don't have to actually vote for who the people sent them there to vote for, for who the people voted for. That's also similar to the Electoral College. But a federal judge said, actually, no, this is party business. The DNC lawyers argued and the court affirmed that they could go in a back room and smoke cigars and decide who the candidate is. That's essentially the primary we had. They said Joe Biden's the nominee. Florida didn't even hold a primary. He was uncontested in a lot of states. So this was not a meaningful or real election. And Republicans are saying it's against the law. A federal court already ruled that actually, no, it's party business, and any
it's not against the law, but now
election laws don't apply.
Right. It's not against the law, clearly, and it's not baked into our founding documents.
It's not the will of the
that
people.
has to be done this way.
And it's not the elites on the other side.
No, this is a smoke-filled room saying, we've read the polling. We have concerns about Joe Biden, even though, again, he won all the delegates. So now we're putting someone else in. You're out. You're in. It's the smoke-filled room. You can be fine with the smoke-filled. You can. Well, they pressured him to do it. You can be fine. You can have no problems with the smoke-filled room, but it is a smoke-filled room.
The national polling shows that it's the popular decision among Democrats that they want him to step down. So how can you say that this is just the elites deciding this in a smoke
Well,
filled
they have buyer's remorse. They already picked him. They voted for him. We don't just say, oh, now
They
there's a
did
poll. So we
not.
switch
In some states, it was only 6,000 people who even cast a ballot in the primary because they didn't have a real
they should have had an
primary.
actual competitive primary, and then we would have maybe found out that the people didn't want
so
Joe Biden to be the nominee.
Joe Biden should have dropped out then and given the people a real choice. Joe Biden being the
I agree with
candidate is
that.
the least democratic thing that could have happened. This, at least, we have some kind of a choice. Nancy Pelosi.
This seems even more this seems even more undemocratic to me is behind the scenes a combination of elite media pressure and very, very wealthy donors say, we'd rather have Kamala Harris. I mean, where's the mandate for Kamala Harris? Who picked her? Who voted for her? She did terribly when she ran for president.
Millions of people voted for her in 2020 to be the vice president. She was on the ticket.
She was on the ticket, but when she was on her, they voted for her to be vice president, not president. When she ran for president herself, she did not do well. She did not cater to any natural constituency. She's never won an election outside of California on her own name, on her own top of the ticket thing.
I think what we're going to see happen is a lot of people turn out and vote for Kamala Harris. A lot of people have organized already, and
She's totally
we've seen
untested.
the polling show that the majority of Democrats wanted this to happen. They didn't have a real say in who the candidate was this time around. But to say that it's the elites making the decision, Nancy Pelosi is probably, not the most
the avatar
elite
of the
person.
elites.
I mean, yeah, but Nancy Pelosi pushing him out is very different from the CEOs that were speaking every day, the Democratic strategists that were speaking every day saying Joe Biden needs to stay in. There were equal elites on either side.
Oh, I don't agree with that. But we're going to discuss this more coming up next. Fun-filled show today. We've got lots to process from all sides. We're going to take a deeper dive into Kamala Harris and who she might select as her VP. We're going to see how the Republicans are responding. We're going to see how RFK Jr. is responding. Lots to get into. More Rising right after this. Well, who is going to be the VP's VP? Now, of course, Kamala Harris still has to win the support of enough delegates in order to become the official nominee. But as the current VP, she's the clear favorite. Biden has endorsed her. Most of the party is falling in line behind her. Here are some of the top potential picks for Kamala Harris's running mate. One is Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Now, he's a successful Democratic leader in a red state. In 2019, he beat a Trump-backed challenger and proved that he can win right-leaning voters, flipping Kentucky from red to blue. Let's take a listen to him speaking this morning.
I'm excited to fully endorse Vice President Harris as for the next president of the United States. The vice president is smart and strong, which will make her a good president. But she's also kind and has empathy, which can make her a great president. And the contrast between her and those running on the other side couldn't be clearer.
Another potential pick is Transportation Secretary, former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. He's already got a jump start on attacking Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance. Let's watch that.
I knew a lot of people like him when I got to Harvard. I found a lot of people like him who would say whatever they needed to get ahead. And 5 years ago, that seemed like being the anti-Trump Republican, so that's what he was. Talked about how he was unfit, how he was cynical, called him an opioid, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a person, but definitely a really... But I mean, for somebody whose identity is that they're connected to Appalachia, which has an opioid crisis, that really is the darkest thing you could possibly say about Donald Trump, at least in public. But behind the scenes, apparently, he's actually calling him Hitler, right? Seriously. 5 years later, the way he gets ahead is that he's the greatest guy since sliced bread. And I actually watched this exact same process with somebody else I got to know in my days in the Midwest, which was my former governor, Mike Pence, who I watched start out as an evangelical Christian who cared about rectitude and family values, and then get on board with a guy who was mixed up with a porn star, make excuses for him, so that he could have power.
Maybe it will be Carolina Governor Roy Cooper from my home state of North Carolina. Some have suggested putting Cooper on the 2024 ticket could help flip North Carolina blue. He's also won when Trump was on the ticket, I will say. Plus, he was spotted at a rally with Harrison Thursday in her campaigning in North Carolina. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly has also become an influential voice for national Democrats. And according to a memo from a Democratic-funded polling group, Blue Labs, Kelly is among several battleground Democrats that performed better than Biden in their respective states. There's also Illinois Governor J.D. Pritzker, who endorsed Kamala Harris this morning, writing, quote, "I am endorsing Kamala Harris for president and will work hard to get her elected because I believe that she is the most qualified and capable person to be president. Also, plus for him, he has an estimated $3.5 billion in net worth and will be the host governor when the DNC takes place next month."
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has also been floated as a potential pick. Shapiro previously served as Attorney General of Pennsylvania and has established himself as a popular swing state governor. Then there's Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who has also been in the mix with Michigan as a key state in 2024. Whitmer has already endorsed Harris this morning. In her statement following Biden's announcement, she wrote, quote, "My job in this election will remain the same, doing everything I can to elect Democrats and stop Donald Trump." So that's a good rundown of the potential picks. So it's notable there, those last two options, Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, are governors of the two most important states in the election, Michigan and Pennsylvania. They are themselves fairly popular in their states. I know I've seen many kind of Democratic commentators saying, so if we have two popular Democratic governors in the two states we most desperately need to win, shouldn't the ticket just, like, forget Kamala Harris, if we could just do it whatever way we wanted it, shouldn't it be Whitmer-Shapiro or Shapiro-Whitmer? Because those are like the can't lose states. But which is, you know, if you're just looking at it from a purely how to improve your odds standpoint. But since Harris is, I think, extraordinarily likely at this point to actually be the nominee, I think it would be significantly strong potential option for her to pick one of those two. Now, for whatever the diversity, the racial and gender and all that sort of balance, I know a lot of people expect that an all-female ticket to be unlikely. So according to that, you know, Josh Shapiro would, I think, be more likely than Gretchen Whitmer. I know I saw a lot of jokes on social media that she will be, you know, absolutely looking for a white man. That's a foregone conclusion that, and most of the people in the mix are in fact white men.
Yeah, I don't like the idea that Pennsylvania or Michigan are necessary because these are battleground states. I think it's silly to imagine that just because they voted for them for governor, they'll vote for them on a ticket for president. I don't think that's how politics works.
It kind of
works. And a lot of Democratic
way.
operatives believe that that's how it works. You need someone who can campaign on the national level. Pete Buttigieg is a heck of a speaker. I mean, you see him there in Bill Maher. I've seen him in person. I was in southwestern Iowa, which is the corner of Iowa that borders Nebraska and Kansas. These are very rural, typical working class Americans. Pete Buttigieg crushed it. And he was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. I don't think being the mayor of a college town is enough to show you can win. But the way he ran when he had a full-fledged campaign, I think demonstrates that he can perform well at the national level. He can perform well on the debate stage. We need someone who can run and win at the national level. I think Cooper's the other good pick. He's termed out of North Carolina. You don't want to run someone who's an active governor and lose a Democratic governorship somewhere. So I think those should be the two top picks.
I mean, these are all good ideas. Mayor Pete speaks very well on television. He's a more compelling speaker than most, or a more effective and articulate advocate for the current administration, which he's been a part of. He is, however, he has the McKinsey ties. I know for a long time people on the left didn't really care for him. It seems to me he's maybe improved his standing with the left somewhat since then, although I'm not an expert on that. It might be, I think the biggest knock against him is that it might be damaging to have, again, two people from within the Biden administration as the ticket. You might want someone, again, who's a governor with a proven track record of winning over independent or right-leaning voters. Roy Cooper would be good. I think Mark Kelly would actually be very good from Arizona, although I'm not, Arizona is such a swing state, and the Senate is different than the governor position in terms of keeping control or having control. Democrats might not want to give up that seat, and then who gets to? The governor gets to appoint, and the governor is currently a Democrat, but that could be just too politically fraught to do that. I think one other point in Josh Shapiro's favor, the Pennsylvania governor, is I heard him speak in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. He spoke very movingly about the person who was killed, whom he knew, who he had worked with, and it was a very effective speech. He was clearly grieving, and it came across as very relatable. I saw a lot of conservative people impressed with how he handled all of that. So he can really walk the walk in terms of not being perceived as just another Democrat or just another Biden world type person to independent voters who need to be won over. So
I've got to
say, my
say,
pitch for him.
I like Pritzker. I do think a billionaire going up against J.D. Vance, who always talks about his working class roots, has made it his entire personality, would be a bad look. It's hard to say, oh, well, you're a billionaire, so what do you know about working class people? It's hard to respond to that, I'll say. And so I think that matchup is tough. Shapiro being able to speak to the assassination attempt in a time when they're pushing unity would also be a smart pick. I think they just need someone who's proven to campaign at the national level. And I think, yeah, so Cooper, Buttigieg, not Pritzker, maybe Josh Shapiro.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of good options, so we will see who she ends up picking, assuming she is the nominee, but I think that is, again, extraordinarily likely. This whole race has gotten so interesting. We were all complaining Biden versus Trump, how boring, a rematch nobody wanted, and now the season finale is going to be interesting after all. You'll love to see it, maybe?
Yeah, and the other guy's just like old, so.
Oh, yeah, okay, now we're starting with I saw a little bit of that. Democrats saying, oh my God, the Republican candidate is so old.
The oldest nominee we've ever had.
I cannot even stomach the cynicism of going that way, but all's fair in love and war and politics. More Rising right after this.
Overnight, Vice President Kamala Harris went from being MIA to being the designate successor of President Biden as the presumptive Democratic nominee to take on Donald Trump in the fall. She ran an unsuccessful presidential campaign in the 2020 cycle. A 2019 ad going for Trump's jugular did age like fine wine. Let's watch.
Sick of this? Well, think about this. He's a world leader in temper tantrums. She never loses her cool. She prosecuted sex predators. He is one.
Grab him by the...
She shut down for-profit colleges that swindled Americans. He was a for-profit college.
At Trump University, we teach success.
Literally. He's owned by the big banks. She's the attorney general who beat the biggest banks in America and forced them to pay homeowners $18 billion. He's tearing us apart. She'll bring us together. This is Trump. And in every possible way, this is the anti-Trump. So if that's what you're looking for in your next president, there's really only one. Kamala.
Harris is wasting no time getting to work. According to reports, she spent upwards of 10 hours on Sunday making phone calls and shopping for endorsements. She moved quickly on social media as well. Harris headquarters, the revamped X account, blended the former Biden page into the new one. Page is already peppered with clips of supporters hitting Trump and J.D. Vance. Take a look.
I mean, if he does not try to get out of the debates, and Donald Trump and I both come from New York. In Brooklyn, we call him a punk in the streets. I don't think he wants to debate Kamala Harris
because I think he'll be afraid to debate.
Oh, he's a political punk.
Kamala Harris?
There's no doubt about it.
Really?
And I think that if his friend was promoting the bout, Don King, it would be the prosecutor versus the felon. That's how you would promote it.
And I want the American people to know what a Kentuckian is and what they look like, because let me just tell you that J.D. Vance ain't from here. Now, the nerve that he has to call the people of Kentucky, of Eastern Kentucky, lazy. Listen, these are the hardworking coal miners that powered the Industrial Revolution, that created the strongest middle class the world has ever seen, powered us through 2 world wars. We should be thanking them, not calling them lazy.
So here we go. Kamala Harris, the felon versus the prosecutor. Is that the right framing to get Democrats really excited about their new nominee, or to get the left really excited about the nominee? Progressives be like, I'm a cop, I lock people up. Hooray,
of course,
vote for me.
progressives are critical of Kamala. She was called Kamala a lot when I was on the Bernie campaign.
Progressives
in 2020.
and libertarians.
But I think we're in a place where there needs to be some kind of counter messaging to Republicans with their tough on crime narrative. And they think it's like sweet irony that Kamala Harris could be the person to deliver that message. There were 40,000 black women on Zoom organizing for Kamala Harris last night. The excitement around her presidential bid is huge. They raised $1.5 million in 3 hours. That's crazy. The organization that organized that is Win with Black Women. They were expecting 1,000, 3,000 people to show up. That is astonishing. Her endorsements are growing. She's got 191 Dems in Congress and Democratic governors that have endorsed. 95 have not. Of those 95, 16 of them were ones that called for Biden to drop out. So that is interesting to see if she'll get those. AOC released this dramatic video saying that no one who's an establishment in the party would get behind Kamala. We're seeing that that's not true. I don't think 16 is enough to justify her making that statement. I criticized her. I said perhaps AOC wants to just be the first female president. I'm not sure what this is all about.
This is so funny.
tantrum.
Man, the shoes are on the other feet
I
here.
know.
I was
Everything's
agreeing with
backwards.
AOC when she was doing that rant about, do we have any evidence that the people would rather have Kamala Harris than Joe Biden? Who is making this decision? I am not at all persuaded. I totally agreed with her. I think Kamala Harris is despite her prevalence on the national scene, her position as the vice president for the last years, I think she is more of an untested quantity than Democrats are considering. I think she could prove to be a popular and effective advocate of Democratic positions, or she could also prove to be totally insincere and unconvincing and unpopular, as she did during her own presidential bid. This is someone, who is Kamala Harris? What does she stand for? She is someone who was a prosecutor in California, and you're right, I think had a kind of, at least tough on crime valence to her existence. Actually, she was criticized by a lot of progressives and libertarians at the time for truancy prosecutions, going after parents of kids who didn't show up for school. There's these kind of funny cartoons of her handcuffing school children. That was the criticism of her at the time. Then she totally and completely reinvents herself in the wake of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and the summer of discontentment over police violence. Then she's seen as this, she's trying to be this progressive person, paying for the bail funds for protesters who were locked up during that time period. So then she's progressive, criminal justice-minded person, which allows her to get the VP nomination because of her being seen as someone who speaks to those issues, even though that wasn't really her record at all. So I think the combination of those things means nobody is really sure what her politics are. I have no idea what her foreign policy is, if she'd be more hawkish or an interventionist, less hawkish and interventionist. I know she has close ties to laborers, and I think on many economic issues, she's pretty much in line with where the Democratic Party is and Joe Biden is. Of course, she was put in the charge of the border. She was supposed to be the border czar, so she wants to frame it as felon versus prosecutor. Republicans are going to want to frame it as, border czar versus guy who wants to build the wall. That's going to be the framing Republicans adopt.
Thankfully, Kamala Harris has an easy job addressing those talking points, because you have Republicans who are talking about the border. They hired more border agents under Joe Biden than they did under Trump. They deported more Haitian Americans than any other administration ever, than the past 10 years of administration. So she has a lot of talking points about how they've been actually very tough on the border under the Biden administration. She can also address her work as AG, as a lot of Republicans have ran with this talking point that California is just this lawless land. The AGs are too progressive. They don't enforce the laws. So
right, exactly.
If she refused to enforce the truancy law, they would say that about her. Yeah. But because she enforced the law of California, she's suddenly going to be attacked for being tough on crime by Republicans?
Well, let's be
I don't think
tough on crime. Tough on crime on Violent people, people who are looting and stealing and burning. Let's not be tough on parents and children. I think it's she was tough on the wrong things.
So
is
AGs
I think
should
the counter.
pick and choose which laws they enforce.
Well, all AGs pick and choose which laws they enforce to some degree. There is, unfortunately, tremendous discretion, and that her discretion was wrong is going to be the knock on her.
Just doesn't feel like there's a lot there to criticize Kamala. I think I'm interested to see her foreign policy stance. I'm interested to see her take a stronger stance on fighting for a ceasefire. We already have Gen Z for Change throwing some support, saying that they will use their infrastructure. I make videos with Gen Z for Change. They're a force on TikTok. And them supporting Kamala Harris is a pretty big deal. We also have
Wait till they find out she's even more pro-Israel than Joe Biden is.
I think they know very well who Kamala Harris is. These are people who pay very close attention to politics. But what's interesting is she's been tested for debates against Donald Trump. And when she was in sort of the practicing behind the scenes, Democrats wanted to know what she would do when Donald Trump's doing stuff on stage, like how he walked around Hillary Clinton during that town hall. And Kamala said, well, I just look at him and say, why are you being weird? And I think we need someone who's candid like that. I think Kamala Harris could be hilarious and effective in the debates with Donald Trump if she stays on message.
I agree she's capable of being hilarious. I don't think I mean it in the same sense you do. Let's not forget that for most of the Biden presidency, she was less popular than Joe Biden. She polled lower than he did, in part because her one job appearing on television and doing interviews and being a spokesperson for the administration did not go over well time and time again. She's the thing people make fun of her for on Saturday Night Live and everywhere else is that she does trip over her words a little bit, or she not exactly trip. That's the wrong way of saying it. She ends up saying a lot of nothing in a very Selena Meyer type way from the television show Veep. Now, that was the knock on her. Now, it just so happens that because of whatever Joe Biden is going through mentally and physically, he is now by far an even less effective advocate and spokesperson for the Democratic Party, and so his polling is beneath hers. And she might, by contrast to Joe Biden, she might be good at speaking and convincing and persuasion. But by just compared to like the average, she has never necessarily been viewed as excelling at this before.
Her clips that have gone viral of her platitudes and her laughing. Laughter's the best medicine in our country needs to heal.
You descend from everything that comes before you.
I think Kamala HQ should take that. Laughter is the best medicine in our nation needs to heal. They should just give it right back to him. But I think if you watch her speeches, she was kind of MIA before last week. Last night wasn't the debut of Kamala Harris. She was campaigning effectively in North Carolina. I tuned into her speech, not expecting much. And she spoke about healthcare access in the country. She spoke about the affordability of housing. She spoke about student loan debt, and she countered the messaging around Project 2025. After Vance's speech, she was giving counter messaging to his points about being a working class kid and how he actually isn't fighting for the working class and how we're really at risk as a nation if we get two people like J.D. Vance, like Donald Trump, who endorsed Project 2025 in the White House. She's an effective speaker, and we're going to see a heck of a lot more of what we saw in North Carolina.
Donald Trump has run as far away from Project 2025 as anyone possibly and conceivably could. He has repeatedly denounced it. He says he has nothing to do with it. I think, and also Project 2025 is a gazillion different policies, some of which I'm sure he does actually support, some of which he probably doesn't. But you sound really, you're coconut pilled, Jess.
I'm coconut pilled.
That's what they're calling it.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to
this term yesterday.
A big change on her handling of whatever she says about Gaza. What she's said so far is what she said as a member of the Biden campaign. And so she's a reflection of the president right now. Now she's going to be a reflection of her own views. And if she is different on Gaza, she could get my vote. But like a lot of leftists, it's going to depend on what she says.
We shall see. More Rising right after this. Donald Trump's world was turned on its head yesterday when he learned that President Joe Biden will drop out of the 2024 race. Trump has a new rival for the White House, and that is Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump told CNN just minutes after Biden announced his decision to exit the race, quote, "Harris will be easier to beat than Joe Biden would have been." Trump reacted to Biden's big news on Truth Social, writing, "Crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve and never was. We will suffer greatly because of his presidency, but we will remedy the damage he has done very quickly, make America great again." Now, Trump was back on the campaign trail in Grand Rapids, Michigan on Saturday, attending his first rally since the assassination attempt. He asked the crowd who they would prefer he run against the day before Biden dropped out.
Who would you like to most run against if you're us, if we want to win? Ready? Kamala Harris. Crooked Joe Biden.
Trump seemed to be feeling the heat yesterday. There were already rumblings online yesterday that he's pondering backing out of a debate against Harris, and he himself called for the debate to be hosted by Fox News. Quote, "I think the debate with whomever the radical left Democrats choose should be held on Fox News rather than the very biased ABC." He posted online, "Biden never had COVID. He's a threat to democracy. It's not over. Tomorrow, crooked Joe Biden's going to wake up and forget that he dropped out of the race today." The issues Trump was planning to attack Biden on the most are no longer a possibility. The Trump campaign will have to now figure out a new strategy to take on Harris. And some might say Republicans are feeling a little lost, trying to figure out where to start. Senior Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller told NBC that a major liability for Harris is that she wants, quote, "to ban plastic straws." She also said previously that she was in favor of banning fracking. It was revealed through open secrets that Donald Trump donated thousands of dollars to Kamala Harris's previous campaigns in 2011 and 2013. Very interesting.
Yeah, and
it reminds me of that. Did you ever see the Oprah Winfrey clip where Donald Trump is being asked about his future presidential prospects? And he said he wouldn't run as a Democrat, he would run as a Republican because those people will believe anything. And it's since been scrubbed from most online record.
Did he really say that? I've seen that, and my understanding was that was a made-up clip, but I don't know for sure. I believe he would. He was a former Democrat, just as J.D. Vance was a former Never Trumper, and the party used to be very different a million years ago, but we're now where we are, which is that the party is completely behind Donald Trump. He has total control of it. There was no dissension against him in the RNC last week. His vanquished rivals, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, have all fallen in line behind him. Donald Trump is more popular in the Republican Party than he was when he won election in 2016. Certainly then after he lost election in 2020. So it's his party, and I don't think they're going to have any trouble running against Kamala Harris. Maybe they would have preferred, I believe that they would have preferred to run against Joe Biden because all the polling had Donald Trump eviscerating Biden right now. So this is a curveball. But of course, in the past, things that have seemed like political curveballs that might be advantageous have not worked out. Remember the game changer decision to have Sarah Palin be John McCain's VP. They needed to do something dramatic to shake up that race because John McCain was clearly losing to Barack Obama in the polling. So they're like, what's something that can really excite people that could be? It's a high risk, high reward decision. Let's go with this relatively politically unknown person. Then she turned out to be terrible and embarrassing, and it was a very, very bad move. History could repeat itself here, or it could not. We don't know. But they'll have no problem running against Kamala Harris, and her, they'll say she's a liberal, left, socialist, Marxist person. Attractive words for you, maybe, but not for swing voters. They'll play up again that she is actually even more in support of progressive environmental stuff, like banning fracking, than Joe Biden is. They're going to try to convince working people in the Rust Belt that she's bad for their economic interests for that reason. They're going to say, right, the kind of California liberal type stuff that is very unpopular in the rest of the country. That's what they're going to run against. And they're going to run against her on immigration because she was the border czar, a very thankless task for years, and did not really do anything on that front.
She did get tripped up in 2020 when Tulsi Gabbard really criticized her for her background as Attorney General, putting parents in jail for having their children not be in school. I think the criminalization of absences in California was a horrible policy, a horrible way to handle truancy issues. And I think that Kamala Harris should not take credit for that. She should say, as Attorney General, I was enforcing the law, which is what you do as Attorney General. Would you propose our Attorney Generals don't enforce the law? Like, it's an easy thing to combat that basic talking point. I hope she doesn't get tripped up. She's very different from how she was in 2020 on the campaign trail. Her campaigning in North Carolina demonstrated that if she spoke exactly like that, she would do incredibly in a debate with Donald Trump, and I think that's what he's afraid of. I think that's why he's posting on X. He's like, what are we going to do? How could Democrats do this? There's a coup in their party. What about all of the money we have fundraised and have spent in campaigning against Biden? Do we get that back? It's just a sign of weakness, honestly. It should have been, okay, excited to debate Kamala Harris. Can't wait. But instead, all of the momentum coming out of the RNC is now quashed because Kamala Harris has so much support.
He agreed to do 2 debates with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden dropped out of the race. So he's under. I fully expect he will do a debate against Kamala Harris. He said maybe it should be on Fox News. We would of course be happy to host a debate here on Rising. They can do it right here. They can do it on News Nation as well with our friends over there. So I have very little doubt. I think they will end up doing a debate. J.D. Vance said, Kamala Harris had called J.D. Vance when he was selected as the VP, and he missed her call because he doesn't answer phone numbers from people who are not in his phone. So she left a voicemail message.
People from California.
Then he called her back.
We know he answered calls
and
from Silicon
my
Valley.
understanding is he said. Didn't want to commit to a debate because don't expect you to be the vice presidential candidate. We expect you to be the presidential candidate. So that suggests to me that there will end up being a debate. I don't think Donald Trump is or should be afraid of debating Kamala Harris whatsoever. He's very confident in debates. He knows that he hit a home run last time. Obviously, it was a very easy job he had debating Joe Biden at a time where Joe Biden is no longer able to speak in complete sentences. But again, Kamala Harris is not known for her rhetorical gifts. Before we started talking about how Joe Biden is so bad at this, we were mostly focused on how bad Kamala Harris is at this. So she can always has room for improvement, and maybe she'll prove to be a much more effective speaker and advocate for her worldview than she has been previously. I think that's totally possible. I think her liabilities can be fixed. I'm not saying this is a foregone conclusion or it's a done deal. The Republicans do probably have a more difficult election to win on their hands now, but it's game on, and Trump will not be afraid of debating her.
Well, what if she brings up policy issues and makes him take a stance on something?
What if he makes her take a stance on? They're both going to do that.
She already has.
She has to own the Biden administration's records of failures. What the American people view as. The American people trust Trump over Biden on immigration, on the economy, on virtually everything except abortion. Every single issue except abortion. And she's been the second in command of the administration. So he still will make her own a record that the majority of Americans are appalled by. And and then she can go after him on the things he said and done relating to the election and his criminal stuff. And maybe that's what Democrats and the media will focus on, and they think that's a winning message, that and abortion. And what do I know? Maybe it is.
I think that Kamala Harris probably has a lot of different views than Joe Biden does. And when she was going around doing her public engagements, she said a lot of platitudes. And I think that was smart because her stances are different from Joe Biden's. But when
different and worse.
I would disagree with that, but her campaigning in North Carolina, I think, was a perfect demonstration. Okay. Watch those speeches. That's what we can expect, not Kamala Harris viral clips of platitudes.
Yeah, I think she's going to deviate. I don't know. We'll see. She could deviate from Biden in ways that are even less appealing, like I said, particularly on the very progressive environmental issues, which I think are going to be a tough sell in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio-type places. But who knows? Maybe she'll balance out her ticket, or maybe she'll moderate herself on those things. I'm seeing a lot of commentary from Dem strategist type people suggesting that she will run as an uber moderate on those kinds of issues. So we shall see.
We shall see.
More Rising right after this.
The GOP is freaking out and melting down over President Joe Biden's decision to exit the 2024 presidential race. House Speaker Mike Johnson called on Biden to vacate the presidency immediately. He wrote on X, having invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans who selected Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee for president, the self-proclaimed party of democracy has proven exactly the opposite. If Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign. The office immediately, November 5th, cannot arrive soon enough.
Donald Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, posted, "Joe Biden has been the worst president in my lifetime, and Kamala Harris has been right there with him every step of the way over the last 4 years. She co-signed Biden's open border and green scam policies that drove up the cost of housing and groceries. She owns all of these failures, and she lied for nearly 4 years about Biden's mental capacity, saddling the nation with a president who can't do the job. President Trump and I are ready to save America. Whoever's at the top of the Democratic ticket, bring it on." Now, with Biden out of the race, Democrats who made excuses for their candidate's advanced age now deploying that argument against Donald Trump. Watch.
Right now, Kamala Harris has her work cut out for her. She's running against the oldest nominee for president of the United States in American history. And so when you have this type of change election, when you have this type of generational divide that you have, it's a question of whether or not you want to go backwards with Donald Trump or forward with Kamala Harris. I mean, the man is nearly 80 years old. And so the question is, can he serve another 4 years? I'm not sure he can.
Former Trump senior advisor Stephen Miller went on a tirade on Fox News last night over Biden's decision to drop out.
They held a primary. People, they had ballots. They filled out circles. They went to the voting booths. They spent money on advertisements. And as President Trump said, the Republican Party spent tens of millions of dollars running against Joe Biden. Now they just woke up one morning and said, never mind, we're canceling the entire primary. We're getting rid of our candidate, and we're pretending the election has never even happened, and we're going to let donors handpick a new nominee. They're publicly admitting that they are an oligarchy. They are not running a democracy. They are not running a representative republic. This is an oligarchy controlled by business interests. And the Democratic Convention is the private corporation that represents those business interests. This is as full frontal an attack on American democracy as we've ever seen in the history of America's major political parties.
That's absolutely hilarious from Stephen Miller. If they cared about democracy, they would care that there wasn't an actual primary in the first place, but they don't care about democracy. If they cared about business interests dominating electoral politics, they would care that Peter Thiel donated the most amount of money of any individual Senate donation to a Senate campaign, with $15 million to J.D. Vance. They're beholden to Silicon Valley. It's just very hypocritical.
I mean, there are a lot of big business interests, yes, supporting the Republican candidates, supporting the Democratic candidates. Of course, what would have been the point of holding a primary process if they were just going to say, actually, we don't want Joe Biden to be the candidate anymore at the last minute? So I do think there's something to this idea that the Democratic process has been exposed as an utter sham in terms of the Democratic Party's decision-making for who their candidate is going to be. But I want to comment on this argument that a lot of Republicans are making right now. I saw Josh Hawley say it, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, in addition to, most prominently, House Speaker Mike Johnson, that, look, if Joe Biden is not running for re-election because he's not mentally capable, he doesn't have the mental acuity to be president anymore, he's too old, he's not well, he can't run for president, then shouldn't he stop being the president right now? Shouldn't he resign? I mean, if it's a demanding job, it's the most demanding job on the face of the earth to be president, and we know why he's getting out of the race. His statement didn't specifically cite health reasons or anything. He just said it's not in the best interest of my party and the country for me to continue running for re-election. I don't know if that's because of what we saw in the debate and what we've seen in his subsequent interviews, that he no longer appears all there, that he can't speak effectively, that age has caught up with him, he can't run for re-election. I think it is not at all out of the question to wonder, well, why shouldn't he just resign now?
Don't you think it's funny that Mike Johnson's criticizing Biden for that, criticizing him for that,
Why?
and entertaining the idea of introducing a 25th Amendment motion to get him out of office because he's too old and their candidate's 1 year younger? Biden's 81, Trump's 80. I think Biden dropping out is because 3 years from now, he can't serve. So why would he run now? Let the democratic process, which is the delegates go to the convention and they vote for the nominee. This is how it happens year over year. If they cared about the democratic integrity of the big D Democratic Party process, they would have cared in 2016. They did not.
It's not that years from now he might no longer be capable. It's that right now we have concerns about his capability. And
it's fine. Have him
and also
drop
they
out.
talked about with Trump. They talked about this all the time. MSNBC and CNN did constant segments about invoking the 25th Amendment, about how he's unfit for office because of a variety of reasons. Like they have been talking about Trump as crazy and out of it through his entire presidency. Now we have a president who is actually, to the kind of letter of the law, in the understanding of that amendment, not seemingly physically capable. Again, that's why the concerns. That's why they're swapping him out. And you're just some crazy right-wing person if you want to have a conversation about whether he should continue to be the president. That makes no sense to me. Obviously, if he can't be the candidate anymore, I mean, look, you can try to split this baby by saying, well, he has enough resolve or energy to be the president, but also not simultaneously run or campaign. I guess they could make that argument. I haven't actually heard anyone in Democratic circles say that because I think they know it's not going to be convincing. But he's fine now, but we don't know about 4 years from now. If that were the case, he would just still be seeking re-election. It's the case that he's not capable now, and thus I don't understand how they can make the argument that he should still be president, except that he only has a couple months left. I mean, it's not like there's nothing happening in the world that we need a president to be responsive to. We have ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine. Ongoing war, Israel versus Hamas, tensions with China. There's a lot happening right now. His rival Donald Trump was almost just assassinated. We need somebody who's all there, who's fit, who's ready, who's cognitively capable, and it's clear no one thinks that's the case with Joe Biden. But he's going to continue being president until next January, just 'cause. Okay.
I agree with you. When we saw the debates on this show, I said, I'm worried that he's commander-in-chief today.
Yeah.
What I don't get about Mike Johnson is Donald Trump, who will be 80 his second year in term, is currently 78. He's going to be 79 when inaugurated, and then at the end of his first year, he will be 80 years old. So I have a problem with Mike Johnson criticizing Biden for his age, saying he's unfit to serve. And I get that people age differently. That is true. But Donald Trump has shown clear demonstrations of cognitive decline as well, and I think we need someone younger in office. And so it's not that Johnson's wrong in saying we can't have a guy like Biden as president. I agree. The problem is that they don't keep that same energy when it's their guy.
Yeah, look, it's not literally the age. I mean, Bernie Sanders is. I always have to double check and verify these things. He's a year older than Joe Biden, and I don't agree with Bernie Sanders' policies, and I don't want him to be president. But I don't have the kind of questions I have about him are not at all in terms of is he physically or mentally capable of doing the job. He has aged differently than Joe Biden, despite being older than Joe Biden. He is clearly capable of being president in a way that I think Joe Biden is not. Similarly with Trump, he I don't think has shown signs of his aging nearly as much. It's not even close. Maybe there's a little bit. Frankly, he didn't look that different at the end of his presidency as he did at the beginning. If you see those portraits over how being president ages you, famously, Lincoln looks about 50 years older from the beginning and end of his term. But if you look at George W. Bush, it was the same way. Barack Obama was the same way. He grayed considerably. It's an aging you kind of job. Donald Trump doesn't look like he aged that much, not nearly to the extent that Joe Biden did. So, look, Republicans could have done better with a different candidate as well, I think. Nikki Haley in the polling, for instance, was doing better versus Joe Biden than Donald Trump was. She tried to make a lot of that when she was running. But at the end of the day, Republicans decisively said, no, we want Donald Trump as our candidate. And so Donald Trump is the candidate. Democrats also said they weren't given much of a choice, to be clear. We complained about the process. There should have been actual debates. There should have been a competitive primary. But the voters said, yeah, we're going to have Joe Biden. And now Democratic elite said, nope, you're going to get somebody else. You're going to get Kamala Harris. So
I think in the spirit of democracy, Stephen Miller should change the attention of his politics to, if he doesn't like delegates voting, get rid of the Electoral College. Let's do real democracy. Let's do a popular vote for president. That would be really fun for everyone, except that Republicans wouldn't win an election for the next 20 years. They would have to entirely create a new party to replace their
No. They run They run to win. You run to win under the current system. If you change the system, they would run different campaigns. Right now, Republicans spend no money, for instance, campaigning in California. There's millions of Republicans in California, but Republicans are not after their votes because their votes don't matter, because they're not going to win the state of California, and so the millions of Republicans voting there are not worth energizing or getting out, because the electoral votes in California are going to the Democratic category no matter what they do. Their strategy, the Republican strategy, is narrowly focused on winning the swing Midwestern states. Doesn't matter how much you run up the scoreboard in the popular vote. Now, you're right. If the system was different, I'm fine with having a different system for picking the president. Then they would run a very different campaign. I don't think you can just say, oh, Republicans couldn't win the popular vote. I mean, Donald Trump was ahead of Joe Biden. Now we got to get some polling versus Kamala Harris. I think he was ahead of Joe Biden in like the popular vote polling for the last several weeks. So it's true that if you had an entirely different system in the last couple of elections, Democrats would have won versus Republicans. But that doesn't actually tell you anything, because the campaigns would have been different.
Well, I still stand by what I said. No matter how hard they campaign, I don't think they're ever going to get enough people to win a popular vote nationally in the United States. But Kamala might not win either if she can't beat these joy allegations. They seem to have nothing. They're melting down. They're coming after her because she's laughing. People are posting compilation clips of her laughing. Donald Trump has made this his main thing about her. And I think that just goes to show they're melting down because they're scared they're going to actually have to do politics and run a campaign. And I don't think they're confident in their ability to do so, which is why they're in chaos right now.
I don't think they're that much in chaos. I think they're resetting. They were prepared to run against Joe Biden, although I'm sure they were reading the same tea leaves as everyone else. And I'm sure Donald Trump was getting daily updates that it's looking more and more likely like Joe Biden is actually going to drop out. I think they're ready to go against Kamala Harris. We'll find out. And it's certainly a more interesting race now, more interesting for us in the media to talk about at the very least, which we will continue doing all day and all week and all month, forever. More Rising right after this. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle is testifying in the House Oversight Committee as we speak, and it is not going well for her. Lawmakers are grilling her on security failures that contributed to a very nearly successful assassination attempt against Donald Trump on July 13th. In her opening statement, she claimed full responsibility for the Secret Service's mistakes on that day. Here's a snippet of her opening testimony.
The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency. We are fully cooperating with ongoing investigations. We must learn what happened, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure that an incident like July 13th does not happen.
Lawmakers did not hold back, skewering Cheatle, especially with reports alleging that the Trump campaign repeatedly asked for more security from the Secret Service, but those requests were denied. Let's listen to a few of these exchanges. First, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, followed by Mike Turner, then Democrat and ranking member in the committee, Jamie Raskin.
The Washington Post said this: top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this: Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir. Sir, again, there was clearly a breakdown and a failure that day.
Have you read the intelligence of the terrorists that are currently in the United States that Director Wray speaks, and those individuals that are here that are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations that are in the process, as Director Wray said, of representing a significant threat of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States?
I have read reports that apply specifically to the Secret Service's mission.
Director Cheatle, because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald Trump had been killed, you would have looked culpable.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers.
Yeah, so those are some very valid questions. This reporting that the Trump campaign had wanted more security and had been denied additional security seems very damning. What she has said in the past about how this incident unfolded is just not remotely satisfactory. I've mocked to high heaven her sloped roof comment that they couldn't have been on the roof where the assassin was because it was sloped, which made absolutely no sense because they had a sniper team on a separate roof that was sloped. That team actually is the one that killed the assassin. To not have that, to say that was outside the perimeter, if you take a step back and look at the field, the area where this was taking place, that was such an obvious place for an assassin for you to have problems. So that they didn't have that cleared and secured was a disaster. The fact that the person, the assassin, Crooks, was spotted by the crowd, was called out, was pointed to multiple times, that law enforcement actually engaged with him, but still Trump was not pulled to the ground or rushed from the scene until the bullets literally started flying. And again, it's not just that Trump narrowly missed being killed, being shot in the head, but someone was killed. Someone was fired upon and killed, and 2 other people were seriously injured. So this is an incredible failure. It's insane to me that she has not yet resigned. She should resign, given that this happened and that it seems to be on the Secret Service. We're still at the beginning of this investigation and understanding exactly why this went wrong, we need to fully understand that picture for what they did that might have been wrong, but this just does not look good.
Yeah, Americans like retribution and accountability, and Kimberly Cheatle is the person they've selected that should fall on the sword for this one.
Well, she's the head of the Secret Service. She should fall on the sword.
I'm not saying it's a wrong decision. Yeah. It's just what's happening. Yeah. I think that she's not giving much in this congressional testimony. I think that they're going to get the most out of either the FBI collecting all of the cell phone videos from that day. I've seen footage that I don't know if it's from that day. It appears to be from all of the footage we've seen from that day of officers standing around, looking at the building that the shooter was on top of. Whether or not they were looking because they knew he was there or not, I'm not sure. People have posted footage that looks like the shooter walking around. And so the FBI is going to have this task of collecting all of this footage, determining what is legitimate and what is not, probably corroborating cell phone footage from multiple users. And the committee is likely going to get access to all of this footage and review it as well. I think people more than anything want to know what happened that day. They don't care that it was a breakdown. Everyone knows that it was a breakdown. That's how it happened. But I think people want to know precisely what went wrong so it can't happen again. Because if Donald Trump didn't move his head, we would be in an entirely different political landscape. We would be in an entirely destabilized political landscape at the global level. Right now, over the weekend, we saw Yemen get bombed by Israel. Israel took credit for the bombing of Yemen. And then we had statements and reports from Putin saying that they were considering arming the Yemenis. This is at the brink of World War II. If we're arming Israel and Israel is bombing Yemen, and Yemen is attacking Israeli ships, and Russia's proposing getting in on the side of Yemen, now we have a proxy war. Imagine a situation where a front-running presidential candidate was assassinated, and that's the global geopolitical climate.
Yeah, it's trying to imagine how different things could have been over the course of last week. An inch is the difference between what happened and Donald Trump having been killed, and then what? And then Joe Biden getting out of the race a week later. We were this close to having both of the people from that debate a month ago no longer running for president. Yes, at a time of increasing, frightening global instability, conflict with Russia, China, what's happening in the Middle East, we were this close to it, and that is on the Secret Service. They are lucky. We are all lucky, of course, that Donald Trump was not killed. That would have been, in addition to the global ramifications for trying to shepherd this nation through a difficult time. I think the potential political instability and protesting and rioting in our cities could have been awful in response to that. It would have been a utterly, inconceivably terrible thing to have happen, and we're very lucky, and I understand why people are, seeing the hands of divine intervention that we didn't go down that route when we came so close to it. But it's on the Secret Service to keep the presidential candidates safe, and and we're always told. I hate when we're lectured to, we civilians that we're inattentive to risks and we don't speak up and we don't, see something, say something. You don't. Nobody talks. That's not true. People are actually good neighbors and good citizens, and people do alert about threats. That's what we always learn in the wake of a school shooting or a mass shooting or some deranged person, that not only were there signs, the warning signs were heeded, that this individual was reported to relevant authorities time and time again. The authorities didn't do their job. It's their job to investigate these things and handle them appropriately, and they didn't do their job. This is a massive failure, the biggest, obviously, the biggest Secret Service's failure in decades and decades and decades. The last, serious attempt on a president's life was Ronald Reagan being shot in 1981 as he was exiting a building. This is very different from that, because in this circumstance, they were supposed to make the area safe for the candidate to speak, check out the perimeter, see what vantage points different potential assailants could have, and then and keep it safe. And they utterly failed to do that. And she has not given us any reason to have confidence in her ability to protect the candidates. So this hearing is underway, and I expect it's going to continue to go roughly for her, and deservedly so.
I think a huge problem with Cheatle's response is that everything we've learned from her, I personally feel like has been teased out of her. She hasn't been forthcoming. It's not like she came out and said, this is everything we know. This is what's going on. We were hearing things from the spokesperson of the Secret Service on Twitter before we were hearing any kind of cohesive message. And a lot of his commentary, even on Twitter, was in response to other people's suspicions about what could have happened. That's a communications failure. We've also seen a lot of commentators respond to this by saying, well, what was the political motivations? What do we know politically about the shooter? And it just speaks to the political class in the United States being so disconnected from everyday people. Even people who attend political rallies are not as obsessed with their side of politics as a lot of commentators believe they are. This idea that, Crooks was this politically motivated person. It turns out there's not a lot we know about him. He was very lonely, and people aren't satisfied with that, and they're coming up with conspiracy theories because we have this belief that everyone is intensely politicized, and that's just not what the American public is. So it's revealed a lot of commentators being so out of touch.
More Rising right after this. The hosts of Morning Joe have been some of Biden's biggest cheerleaders. Here's them reacting to the news that he is dropping out of the race. Let's watch.
Well, obviously, on many levels, I'm really sad. Joe Biden is a patriot. I love him. I love his family, and I love what he's done for the country. He had authenticity and touch, whether you saw it or not. But everything about him, even sometimes the stutter and the bumbling, was part of the touch, part of the sort of empathic, very loving, very clear-eyed touch that he had that allowed him and enabled him to be an effective president. But all of that turned against him after the debate for all the reasons that we discussed. And he would say, no time to complain about it. Let's move on. It's go time. And Democrats really have a moment of momentum here. And my hope is that they grab it and run with it, get unified, get organized, get coordinated. No more infighting. Donald Trump is not easy to beat.
Mika also warned that the GOP's, quote, hate campaign against Kamala Harris has already begun. Let's watch.
And I've heard from inside Republican circles and right-wing media that the hate campaign against Kamala Harris has begun. You'll notice they purposefully pronounce her name wrong. They say Kamala. They do it all the time. It is on purpose. But the talk is to start that hate campaign and get it going and start it churning. So my hope is that major Democrats and major Republicans, from the Obamas to the Bush family to military leaders, get behind the democracy ticket and we move on.
Morning Joe could have been running an attack ad, and instead they're, I don't know, eulogizing Biden? They're talking about him like he's dead, Robbie.
Well, sometimes he seems that way when he's talking on camera. What would hate campaign against Kamala Harris? They're running against her. They're going to call out her rhetoric, her political stances. This kind of tone policing here. What Democrats are running hard against Trump. They hate Donald Trump. They call him all sorts of nasty names. In fact, they've even mispronounced his name. Remember all the Donald Drumpf kind of stuff that late night comedians thought was so hilarious. So, spare me the pearl clutching over Kamala versus Kamala. No one cares. Republicans, Donald Trump, are going to hit her on her record as a part of, they would say, the failing Biden administration. They're going to highlight the ways in which they would call her even more failing-y than Joe Biden, being even more progressive on a handful of issues, and then maybe less progressive on some other issues in a way that makes her maximally unappealing. That's what they're going to talk about, how she handled the border, what she thinks about green issues, whether she's authentic and compelling as a person. Let's not call that hateful. I'm sure there's also going to be hateful attacks on her, to be clear. I'm sure some corners of the internet or the right will slam her for being a woman or will say racist or sexist things. That's absolutely going to happen. But the bulk of the Republican Party will be running against her record and her part of the administration.
Well, Donald Trump already called her crazy.
Yeah,
he called her crazy. He was giving a speech. He said, listen
oh,
to
no,
not
that.
You can tell a lot
prosecute him again.
No, but that is something hateful to say someone's crazy you're running against. Because she laughs, that's why. And this speaks to a huge cultural and societal issue. Whenever a woman expresses joy or laughter, they are attacked. I've had it. I've had posts of me joking around with my followers on TikTok, and there's always some random dude in the comments like, are you high right now? Because women are supposed to be quiet. They're not supposed to be loud. There's this belief that you have to quiet those parts of you in order to be receivable. And I think it's great that Kamala Harris is not that. She's someone who's laughing, who's boisterous, who's joyful, and them attacking her for it has pointed out a very interesting thing. Someone commented on an X post about this, and they said, well, think about it. All of the airtime Donald Trump has had, can you recall what his laugh sounds like? And I can't. And that's scarier than someone laughing frequently.
I think it's okay to make fun of Kamala Harris. The kind of laugh she does, it's kind of a little it's not. You can obviously be too mean-spirited when you make fun of national figures or political figures. The coconut tree thing was funny. Her statements about, and the thing about time and how it passes that are so vague and, again, reminiscent of Selena Meyer from Veep are funny, and she's going to be made fun of for it, and that's okay, just as Donald Trump is made fun of for his appearance and his mannerisms and his dance moves like this. They made fun of him for it at the Republican National Convention in a kind of, again, not a mean-spirited way, but an affirming way. We are allowed to mock our presidential candidates. We have the First Amendment, goddammit. And I will be making fun of Kamala Harris on this show. I will also be making fun of Donald Trump, and I'll be making fun of all sorts of funny people. So I think that's just fine.
They also said that she slept her way to the top. She's dated celebrity figures like Montel Williams.
Well, that I think is stemmed to this reporting on that. What was it? Again, I don't know the specific details. It was someone in her upcoming coming through the California judicial process to become Attorney General. There have been accusations that she slept with. I have to Google it to know the exact details, but that's what they're referring to there. And I don't know whether that was verified, but I've read that story. I've seen that report. So that is what they're going to be talking about.
I'm familiar with the story. I mean, it was a popular story in 2020 when, there was a huge primary that...
Didn't he come out and say she slept with him? Was what prompted that? Again, I need to do some research before we go.
Anyway, they're running with that narrative. Again, Donald Trump is someone who's
I'm just saying I don't know if it's a narrative.
Who's on the record in a court of law for committing sexual assault. Mm-hmm. It's something he's admitted to and has.
He's not admitted to committing sexual assault. He denies committing it. He's been convicted of it.
But he's made statements. Maybe they're not considered by a court of law. I believe they were part of the official record where he takes credit for what he's done there. And so this is someone who's on the record of Epstein's visitors. We just got more documents come out from the Epstein case, and they're saying Kamala Harris, because she had relations with people in the same field of work as her, that she slept her way to the top. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So the attacks they have on her, I think, are just revealing that she is not someone that they want to attack her on her merits, because all of them are just like sinkholes. If you say, you know, she was too tough on crime, well, you're the tough on crime party. How are you going to hate her for that? Well, she handled the migrant crisis. Well, now you open the door for her to talk about how the Biden administration hired more agents and was actually tougher on the border and did more deportations than the Trump campaign when it comes to Haitian Americans, which has been a major focus considering what's going on in Haiti. And so I think that there is an obvious void there, but I want to go back to Morning Joe, because they are eulogizing President Biden. And I think President Biden's legacy is that he let John Kirby seemingly run the White House, that the foreign policy was an absolute disaster, that time and again he tried to control Netanyahu, who he was giving weapons to, and made critical statements saying, you can't do this, this is a red line. He crosses it, Biden doesn't change the policy, continues to transfer weapons to this guy. His legacy will be sponsoring the genocide in Gaza, and I don't think this is a man people will remember as a hero, because he should have dropped out far sooner to be remembered as a hero.
I pulled this up because I kind of butchered the facts about it. So this is from the Daily Beast, which is a liberal outlet. So a charge has been endlessly recycled whenever Harris is mentioned as a future president. In 2020, the pair did date from 1944 to 1995. This is Kamala Harris and 94 and 95. This is Kamala Harris and Willie Brown is his name. And he was 30 years her senior. This is right before, the year before he became mayor, and he was legally married at the time, although they'd been separated. So that is what is being referenced by the slept her way to the top kind of thing.
One guy. Astonishing.
Yeah, I'm not putting any stock in it, and I don't think this is the correct way to go after Kamala Harris. So I am not in charge of what people on the right or the Republican Party does, but they should go after her for her role in the Biden administration and her policies on criminal justice and energy and environment, and her flip-flopping on some of those policies is the way to pursue her, not because she's a woman or because she has a funny laugh, although we can point out the funny laugh and we can point out the funny statements, just as we point them out when Donald Trump does them and he gets mocked. So I don't like this approach from the Morning Joe type people that it's hateful if you make fun of Kamala Harris, but it's not hateful to make fun of Donald Trump, which they do all the time. Then that's a double standard. The other, where it's like you can't make fun of her, what, because she's a woman? It's not okay to make fun of her? She can be made fun of because she's a leading political contender for the presidency, and it's okay to mock our leaders, is what I would say.
I mean, I think Trump is a boisterous guy. No one says, actually, people do say, but Kamala Harris doesn't say, he must be crazy because he's so boisterous. But I think calling someone crazy because they're boisterous and they laugh a lot is a hateful thing to do. So, in the name of unity, he should stop doing that.
All right, more Rising right after this. The Democratic Party seems to be passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris as their 2024 nominee, but some are calling this move anti-democratic. Let's hear what 2024 independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had to say.
If the Democrats do what I suspect they're going to do, which is to anoint Kamala Harris, a vice president who is monumentally unpopular within her own party, but they're doing it because it's the easiest way to hold on to the money. It's a cabal that is choosing the same way the Soviet Union did. Russia has elections. Vladimir Putin wins with 88% of the vote because he controls who can be his opponents. And he controls the media. And the same is true now of our political parties in this country.
He's not the only one making that point. Journalist Michael Schellenberger, who's often on our show, also not on board with the Democrats' latest move.
Nobody could watch the events of the last few weeks and believe that the Democratic Party is democratic. It's a party controlled by the media, donors, and the deep state. However one feels about the GOP, the same can't be said for Republicans. Republican voters rejected their own party leaders, donors, and the foreign policy establishment to nominate Trump for president in 2016. This is the third time in 3 presidential elections that Democratic Party elites have subverted democracy to choose a presidential candidate.
So I do think there is something to this argument. The issue is the process to pick Joe Biden again, to re-nominate Joe Biden for the presidency this cycle was not very democratic itself because they didn't hold actual debates. They did not run competitive primary contests. They didn't give Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr., when he was actually in the party, any chance. The attitude of party leaders was it's going to be a coronation for Biden because he's the incumbent president, and our policy is, when you're the incumbent, you're not supposed to face a real, genuine primary challenge. That's what people like Simone Sanders said on TV every time she was asked, no, Joe Biden will be the nominee because he wants to be, and he's already the president, so we're not doing a real process. So there wasn't a democratic process to arrive at him again. So I get that. So the process to pick him was not very democratic, and now the process to unpick him has also not been particularly democratic in my view, because this is just the voice of the media and of party elites and also the wealthy donor class saying if Joe Biden remains the nominee, we're all out. So he was essentially forced to step aside, forced to release his delegates to, and now they're saying it's going to be just to Kamala Harris. So there's not going to be an open convention type situation, it seems, where you have a number of candidates competing for the votes. So the way we got here wasn't very democratic. Where we've ended up is not very democratic. It's not the same as, because the party doesn't have to follow democratic processes, and in different political eras, parties have nominated candidates in ways that were totally undemocratic, smoke-filled rooms. You can argue whether that was better or worse. In some sense, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are private organizations that can, pick whatever policies they want is their way of picking their candidate. Who gets to be host of Rising is not a democratic procedure. We don't have the viewers vote on it. It's, a decision that's made by the company, right? Because we're not obligated to follow democracy in all facets of all life. However, I would say at the same time, they're running on this democracy is such a fundamental good. To have swapped out their guy in this manner, I think it raises my eyebrows, even if it's perfectly legal. And at the end of the day, of course, what they're going to do to maximize their chances of winning. Fair enough?
Yeah, they're following the legal democratic process, just like there will be a legal democratic process without any ballots cast to replace J.D. Vance in the Senate. If you're saying this is anti-democratic, that's ridiculous. She's on the ticket. People voted for her to become the vice president, knowing that if Joe Biden stepped aside, that she would either inherit all of the resources of the campaign, or if he stepped down as president, that she would become the president. He is the incumbent.
But he's not stepping down as
and
president. That would be a great argument if he did step down as president, but he's not doing that.
But I also just said she would inherit the resources because she's on the ticket in the campaign. They are running mates. They already won an election together before. That's how our electoral process works. He did win when she was on the ticket, the nomination for president with an actual primary process. I have disagreements with how the primary process goes, but they followed the legal process. The Democrats' stance on democracy being in peril is because Donald Trump wants to govern as if he is a king. He wants the executive branch to have absolute power. He doesn't care about people who are appointed to serve in positions, people who are elected to regulate those federal offices. The Department of Homeland Security is subject to the purview of Congress per the Constitution. They want to be able to say everything that happens in every branch of government. That's the kind of democracy that is at stake. If they actually cared about democratic processes, they would also care that there was not a popular vote electing, Donald Trump to be the president of the United States. They would also be upset about that. They would not like the Electoral College. They would not like that the primary process was unfair to Bernie Sanders. They don't care really about democracy. They're just using this to step on one of the Democrats' talking points.
I care that the primary process was unfair to Bernie Sanders. I agreed with that. I think the difference is, and I disagree with some of the policies you brought up in terms of what the Republicans are trying to do and whether that would be anti-democratic, but they're not running on the preservation of democracy to the same degree. They're running on correcting specific failed policies, immigration, the economy. I would say I want them to. I don't know if Trump's going to do this. I'm not personally a huge fan of Trump, nor do I really trust him to implement policies that I think would be good and that many conservatives want in terms of de-empowering the federal bureaucracy and returning more power to Congress or local authorities rather than having us be governed by a cabal of behind-the-scenes progressive administrators who hold on from administration to administration, like was laid bare during COVID when we found out that Fauci and the Centers for Disease Control can dictate policy from the highest offices in the country to local people everywhere without much Democratic input. That's what I'm worried about, and that's what I would like to see Trump reverse. I have no faith that he will reverse it because he was president and didn't, but certainly that's what many in the conservative movement are hoping Trump accomplishes. Democrats have just made so much about democracy itself, and I think this process I would say this process was not particularly democratic. That's fine. It's fine that it wasn't democratic. You're right that the delegates can make whatever decision that they want, and Joe Biden has released them to pick some candidate other than him. So it is all technically above board. However, it is being done at the behest of, the people were not all behind Joe Biden to begin with, but Kamala Harris only polls slightly better than him. We didn't have a process where we could have found out, well, maybe there's some Democrat out there who actually is really popular, who actually commands a lot of people. Maybe it's Bernie Sanders. Maybe it's someone like Bernie Sanders. We didn't do that. The
delegates can go and vote for whoever they want at the convention.
Yeah, but nobody's they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. Nobody's stepping up to actually say, you know what, I would like to run. Here's what I stand for. Here's the policies I think would be better for America. It's just all about how Donald Trump is so evil and pernicious. And we just read the polling, which showed Biden can't do it. So now it's going to be Kamala Harris. I think Democrats are going to be in for a little bit of a rude awakening when Kamala Harris hits the campaign trail and they find out, oh, this is a figure that has never excelled at campaigning on the national stage in the past. But maybe she'll surprise us and do a really good job. I think that's certainly conceivable. We'll just have to see.
We saw her do a great job campaigning last week in North Carolina, and I think that contributed to their decision to say, okay, we are going to endorse Kamala. That's going to be the official stance rather than an open convention where Joe Biden hasn't endorsed anyone. Now, the delegates that are going to vote in the convention, the majority of them are being sent with the people they represent having voted for Joe Biden. It's very likely they'll vote for, Joe Biden's endorsed candidate. But as he said in his speech, the democratic process is that the delegates can vote for whoever they want. He acknowledged that before Kamala even dropped out. And so we're at a point in time where the polling was popular among Democrats and people in the country that they wanted Joe Biden to drop out. So this narrative that it's just the elites that want this is a ridiculous talking point, in my opinion.
I think you're right. The people were not sold on Joe Biden in the first place, but it's the elites changing their attitude. The elites were for Biden, and they they betrayed him, and that's why he's not the nominee. You're right that the people were not. This isn't being done over the people's objections. It's not like the people are like on the Republican side. The equivalent would be Trump, who his people are absolutely behind. What if, as a result of the conviction, somehow they did some behind-the-scenes, high-level Republican Mitch McConnell scheming process to have the delegates select Nikki Haley instead of Donald Trump. That would be the equivalent of a kind of coup here. So that would be different because the Republicans, the base, is totally behind Trump. I agree with you that there's not that same level of commitment to Biden from the base. People, in fact, a majority of Democrats were very unsure about him running for re-election, given his age. But the party leadership was all behind him, and the media was all behind him, and they have turned on him, and that's what caused him to exit. He didn't exit because the people were not for him in the first place, in which we never would have gotten. Like, if the people had been listened to, we would never have even gotten to this point. So that's why I think the narrative that it's an elite thing is going to take hold. But I agree with you that it's not. It's more complicated than that because this is not being done over the wishes. The wishes of the people are not being invalidated, but the will of the elites is actually what is triumphing on the Democratic side because they changed their mind. I would say it that way.
Yeah, I think there are probably some people that are Republicans that are upset that the elites that wanted Donald Trump to not win the nomination.
Yeah, they lost.
They wanted someone else. I think those elites, because they lost, which was not all of the elites in the Republican Party, but some of them, because they lost their battle to oust Trump, they're jealous that the elites that pushed Joe Biden out with the support of most Democrats and most people in America, that they were successful in their efforts. And that's real democracy. That Joe Biden, just because his ego wants him to be the nominee, that's not enough in a democratic system. If your party doesn't support you and if the people don't support you, you shouldn't run again.
Real democracy was on display in the Republican primaries this time around, where the elites were desperate to have the elites and conservative media desperate for anyone but Trump. Give us Ron DeSantis. Give us Nikki Haley. Give us Chris Christie. Anyone. And the voters decided democratically, no, we want Trump again. Trump is our man. We're sticking by him. We don't care. They told the elites to go take a hike, and they got Trump, and they made them bow down and bend the knee to him. And it was the voice of the people on the Republican side that has guaranteed Donald Trump is still the candidate, despite the wishes of the elites. I think it's an interesting contrast.
The guy that cut corporate taxes so much that we saw corporate profits increase 50%, that's a man of the people.
Well, we can cut. Well, he's going to cut taxes for the people who make tips as well. We're going to cut taxes for everyone. Corporations, people.
He didn't say he'd cut taxes for everyone, though, now, did he?
He said he was going to cut, you heard this tip?
Waiters and bartenders are not everyone.
Well, I think, I don't speak for the Republican Party. I want to cut taxes for everybody.
His plan has middle-class tax cuts and working-class tax cuts, which were a smaller margin than the corporate tax cuts, expiring in December of 2025. And we have not heard a new plan of what's going to happen.
I would like to see them cut taxes for absolutely everybody, but maybe we can dig into that at a later date, what specifically the tax plans are, because that does it for us today on Rising. It was a lot of fun to be back in the chair to discuss these exciting developments with you, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here.
Robbie.
Things keep happening. That is certainly one way of putting it.
Be sure to like.
Go ahead.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. Lots of stuff happening. And for those of you who like to listen while you're on the go, we are available wherever you get your podcasts.
And we will be back here tomorrow. We presume as of tomorrow it will still be Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, but who knows? Anything can happen. See you then.
Bye, y'all.